Hello and welcome back to the Sekimeiya Spun glass. I've just recorded 1.5 hours and hadn't actually put on the additional thing for my microphone so it actually properly records the voice. I hate my life. Well, I'll voice over it. As soon as I made the slightest physical contact with it, I felt a ridiculously painful burn on my fingers that didn't last even a split second until I was somewhere else. Before I could comprehend that it had worked, I fell to the floor and hurt myself. Disoriented, I looked around me. It took me a few seconds to recognize where I was. In front of me were blank screens, and my surroundings were overall dim. It was the security room. My pose had also changed. I'd appeared in front of the desk and had immediately fallen backward, hitting my back on the chair. What the fuck? Was I sitting? That was what it had felt like. I'd been sitting on top of nothing, which had resulted in my fall. I sighed and stood up. It had worked again, and that time I had appeared in the security room. I was about to exit the place when I realized that I had a much smarter option. I dragged the chair I'd knocked away back to its place and sat on it. Then I moved the mouse around to power on the screens. They all lit up at once, which made me squint momentarily. The large desktop appeared, but it only directed my gaze at the lower right side of the middle screen. 11:10 was the time that I saw. I did go back to the past once again. This is confirmation that I wasn't going crazy. The last time we checked the time, Sai has said it was 11:36, and he already confirmed to me that his time is the same as this computer's. I'd estimate that after that point, 15 more minutes passed until I touched the Sekimeiya, which means that I went approximately 40 minutes into the past. 40 minutes. Twice the last amount. Is that a coincidence? It could just be that the amount of time traveled is also determined randomly. I thought earlier that could be the case with the location you go to, but given I appeared sitting down right in front of this desk, there must be more to that. At this point in time, I should be on the 5th floor of Shiria. At 11:20 we were all inside the event room after regrouping, discussing the elevator movements. When we heard a noise. That's right, I can attempt to see what made it, and most importantly, what happened to Naomi. I started getting tense. It was possible a murder was about to occur. We deemed the bathroom empty before searching the other floors, and I was in the time frame where the second Naomi had died. I exited the security room slowly. We'd searched through the whole floor before going up, so there shouldn't have been a hiding culprit. However, the elevator movements still remained unexplained. Someone had arrived on the crystal floor while we'd been investigating the others. Could I even consider preventing Naomi's death? If causal loops were how time travel worked, I wouldn't be able to. Did I have a way to be sure though? Even though what had happened the first time pointed at the idea that modifying the past wouldn't happen, the only way I could learn that with certainty was by attempting it. Incidentally, by attempting to change the past, I was putting myself at risk. We hadn't found my dead body, so I could feel a bit calm in that regard. However, if my actions could alter the past, that would be invalid. Should I be worried about that? If I tried to prevent Naomi's death and subsequently die for it, that could make my time travel an impossibility and lead into an obvious paradox. How would the universe handle that? Would it even allow it? Maybe anything I try to change the past will be completely futile. I just have to wait and see what I can do. From hallway A, I saw people walking down the stairs. I quickly ran toward the lobby, knowing that they wouldn't see me. They've already come, so the elevator movements have already occurred. It's possible Naomi's already dead. Did I appear too late to see what happened? I moved to hallway B. I knew we'd shortly enter the event room through the opposite door, so I'd be safe there. Will they really not see me? I went 40 minutes into the past, and even though nobody claimed to have seen me, it appears I was always on this floor. I approached the bathroom slowly, trying not to make any sound. From the middle of the hallway though, I noticed that something important hadn't happened yet. The door. It's open. We'd found the bathroom door locked, and inside it had been Naomi's body. Since it hadn't been locked yet, something was bound to happen if I just watched from a distance. Unfortunately, the door was only very slightly open, so I couldn't see inside. I kept moving and entered the cleaning room, which would provide me with the best view of the bathrooms without being spotted. A little paranoid, I looked behind me to make sure there was no one else there. Who's going to appear? Will I be able to see the culprit's identity? Naomi might also show up at any moment, but from where? This floor was empty, and the following ones up to the attic were just investigated too. Maybe whoever's about to appear will travel from the future if they haven't been in the attic the whole time. It's unlikely anyone exited the attic through the main door, given the footprints. Even though the elevator should have been on the 5th floor, it was below the 3rd. Someone from the attic could have called it, arrived here, and then sent it back up empty. That would fall into place with what Sai heard. It also means the person must now be on this floor, and most importantly that Shiria and I missed the elevator sound 3 times. Do I accept this as a possibility? I kept watching for a few minutes. Eventually the indistinct voices I'd been hearing faded away, indicating that the group had gone to the event room. It has to happen at any point. We did hear a noise and the door hasn't been locked yet. I remained motionless, peeking through the small gap of the door. Was I about to witness a murder? Would I see a person popping into existence out of nowhere? Where would they go then? If the second Naomi isn't dead yet, both her and the culprit have to come. One of them is accounted for given the elevator movements, but what about the other one? Or were both of them responsible for the elevator trips? Before I could continue imagining all sorts of scenarios, it began. Naomi was coming from hallway C. There she is. Should I show myself? I couldn't decide if that was a good idea. There was still no culprit to be found, so I chose to hold off. Akura's description of Naomi's face came short of the expression she was wearing. She was very visibly terrified, breathing heavily, moving oddly, and stopping in place every few seconds. Even though I was a fair distance away, I saw pure distress all over her. What had she experienced? Did she know her dead body had been found? Was she perhaps aware of what would happen to her? She must have traveled to the past at least once, or her own existence wouldn't make sense. Finally, after a very long breath that seemed to give her some confidence, she did what I thought she'd do. She headed toward the bathrooms. She opened the women's and looked inside it. It appeared she was searching for something, and given she didn't look around very much, it might have been a person. Quickly, something caught her attention inside the other bathroom. I couldn't know what it was, but as she placed her hand on the doorknob, her stance gave away that she was wary of what lay behind the door. I hadn't seen anything strange happening in the bathroom since I'd begun watching. Was it possible that someone had been there the whole time? Naomi opened the door carefully, keeping her guard as high as it could have been. I bit my lip tightly. When the door was open, she looked inside. Since the knob was on the left, it was impossible for me to see what she'd seen, but her tension slightly lowered once she saw the contents of the little room. At the same time, mine increased as I knew what must have been about to happen. I was too far to hear her, but she was speaking. Someone had really been inside the bathroom the entire time. It didn't make sense. That person must have been the source of the elevator movements. So where had Naomi come from? She didn't have the attic key, and she couldn't have come from the future either, as that was about to become impossible. Out of nowhere, Naomi's body was pulled from the inside. I felt as if my heart had been pulled along with her. I couldn't see her anymore, and 2 people were in the bathroom, their figures hidden from me. I'd probably never had the chance to stop it, and the camera must have at least caught the image of her murderer, but during the few seconds that I was pathetically scared without being in danger, I knew that the life of a person was being taken right in front of me. Despite my future knowledge and advantageous position, I hadn't done anything to prevent it. I'd been thinking that at least the culprit would have to escape in front of me until I realized how inhuman that was. The universe wouldn't allow me to change the past? That was ridiculous, and if anything, it was providing me with a way to do it. I ran toward the bathroom as fast as I could. I definitely still had time to change the past. It wasn't too late, and I could trap the culprit inside. I must have been changing the past in some way, as I wouldn't let them escape. But that thought instantly vanished when I heard a sound in front of me. Before I could get to the bathroom, the door was forcefully shut from the inside and then locked. I recognized the sound as soon as I heard it. It was the one we'd heard from the event room. How? It should have been impossible since the culprit was still inside. However, I didn't have time to think about it. Faster than I'd ever run, I dashed off to the stairs, knowing that in less than a couple seconds, Erina's gaze would seal off the entire floor. I made it before I was spotted only because I'd reacted fast enough, but it didn't make any sense. We were going to search through the entire floor and find no culprit. Were Erina and Isla going to let them escape? If so, I was about to see it, and since I was one floor higher, I could hear the elevator too, which was on a crystal floor. Once again, I waited, watching over the stairs from afar. However, a couple minutes later, nobody had gone up. He must have already been next to the locked door, and we would only find Naomi inside. The way we'd coordinated ourselves back then had been effective. That meant that Erina and Isla prevented me from going down and seeing what had happened to Akaro, which was also something I'd wanted to find out. So, by rushing to the door, I didn't change anything. That had always happened, and yet we didn't find the culprit who should have been inside. It's what I thought. The past won't change. As soon as I was determined that I was going to do it, I was blocked off from succeeding. That's very flimsy reasoning. Of course, before concluding anything, I have to verify that they truly didn't find the culprit and that everything is happening as I remember. But this means that something happened to the culprit. Did they go back to the past before we found them? They locked the door as soon as I approached it, so they must have escaped after that point. There's a big problem. The Sekimeiya is currently in the event room. It's clear that under some circumstances it does make you travel to the past, but the culprit couldn't have used it unless we're severely misunderstanding how it works. They probably are severely misunderstanding. I don't know what I said at this point in the recording. If touching it physically is a requirement to travel, the culprit inside the bathroom couldn't have used it. Is there any way to get around that? For example, since we had inspected the whole floor earlier, it's very likely that the culprit appeared from the future. Could they have brought the Sekimeiya with them and then used it to escape from the bathroom? I think I was saying something about there possibly being two Sekimeiya. I don't know how that would be possible. The Sekimeiya is the cause of the travel, so you shouldn't be able to travel with it. So then, what method could they have used to disappear like that? Why did they kill Naomi? And while we're at it, who the fuck is this person? Someone who will travel to the past. We have that person, Akaro. He's about to travel to the past right now, but for some reason we won't find him again until later. Did he have a way to escape the bathroom? Was he the one who shut and locked the door before I reached it? My whole body was still tense and I hadn't stopped biting my lip. I couldn't get the thought that I'd let Naomi die out of my head. How is that even possible though? She died twice. I made a plan in my head. If Akaro was the culprit, he must have been who'd hidden the Sekimeiya while we'd been in the attic. We'd woke up in a few minutes and I knew for a fact that we wouldn't look through every floor. So as long as I hid myself in a partition, I wouldn't be seen. Afterward, I could go down again and see who'd hidden the Sekimeiya. Once more, I'd have a chance to see the culprit firsthand. And if Akaro had been telling the truth, I would see him for sure, as he told us that he'd seen us inspecting the floor. I recalled our movements downstairs. Erina and Isla had stayed in place, watching the path between floors while the rest of us had moved back and forth between the two rooms with their individual Naomis. Eventually, after exiting the event room, we'd lost track of Akaro. We'd searched through the whole floor after that, and I could attempt to repeat that myself. I waited out the short time before I would have a safe way down. After 4 or 5 minutes, I saw the group coming up the stairs. We were going to the attic, which confirmed that Erina and Isla really hadn't gone anywhere. They had definitely been watching. I dashed into the partitions to avoid being seen. When the group was gone, I slowly stepped out. Nobody could have passed after them. I'd been watching the glass from the second partition. The crystal floor was isolated, and according to what Akaro had told us, he had to be there. I moved down. I couldn't do an optimal search, being only one person, but I should have been able to find someone who wasn't deliberately hiding from me. Akaro had said that he'd only teleported. Regardless of the veracity of that, he had to still be on the floor. I opened the door to the elevator, revealing its barren interior. Next, I looked at the bathrooms, which only contained Naomi's body the way I remembered having left it, not yet covered by a curtain. That seemed to confirm that I was truly reliving something I'd already lived from a different perspective. Akuro had said that he hadn't gone up any floors, so even though I couldn't keep track of the entire floor, if I didn't see him, it would strongly imply that he'd been lying. I began looking through every room. I'd seen other people do it, but I'd never personally been the one to inspect. I felt my search was a little paradoxical. If Akuro was in one of the rooms, he would see me even though he hadn't mentioned it. Despite that, I continued. The cleaning and staff rooms were empty, and so were the first few crystal rooms. Once I entered the event room, I saw the Sekimeiya still there, giving away that it would soon be moved. I continued with the remaining rooms in hallway B, which all appeared empty. Even though Akuro's body was the biggest of all of us, he could still fit inside a cabinet. It was ridiculous to think he might have hidden in one, but I couldn't ignore them because of that. After the mechanical room, I began the hallway A search. A few minutes later, I'd confirmed that it was fully vacant. I knew how suspicious that was. Surely if Akuro was there and wasn't up to anything, he would have been drawn in by the noise. I should have seen him. Had he seen me all by myself and avoided me? If so, he must have known that I'd been about to travel to the past when he'd seen me and Shirya heading downstairs, since we told him that we'd all stayed together the whole time. If he'd hidden the Sekimeiya, we would have given away that we were about to find it, and despite that he hadn't stopped or questioned us. I moved to the cleaning room again, knowing that Akuro would eventually enter the men's bathroom. Immediately, I noticed two things. One, the bathroom's door looked exactly like it had when we'd come back down. We'd seen that it looked different from how we'd left it. The second thing I noticed was that I'd been responsible for it. I had looked inside it and left the door slightly more open than it had been. What the hell was up with that bathroom? I knew Akuro would be inside it in a few minutes, but the door threw me for a loop. Unable to piece together what was happening, I stood still, waiting for what was bound to occur. Sai looked at the time at Akuro's request, and at that point it had been 11:36. After the time I'd taken to investigate every room, I didn't have to wait very long before I saw the others appearing from the other side of hallway C. They had just searched every upper floor after visiting the attic for the first time. They noticed the difference with the bathroom's door and went to check it. Inside, they saw Akuro. I couldn't just rule out that he'd entered it, but the position of the door indicated otherwise. Something very strange had been going on inside that small room. After a bit, Sai turned around and headed toward the event room, at the same time that Shirya went to grab a curtain. I reacted fast enough to avoid being seen, but I hadn't anticipated it. Regardless, everything was happening just as I'd lived it. What had happened to Akuro? The truth might have been behind his strange words, his lack of time travel. When he'd disappeared from our sight, we hadn't been able to find him. Before that point, Naomi's killer had also vanished completely from the bathroom, and Akuro, who'd been found there, claimed to have only teleported. Properly piecing all that together must have revealed the truth or formed another piece to place somewhere. But despite thinking that, I couldn't decide whether to suspect him or not, because I still didn't fully understand the way the Sekimeiya worked, and because the little I knew was contradicted by everything I'd witnessed from my new point of view. After my past self went to check the Sekimeiya, everyone but Akuro left. I saw Isla's and Shirya's purses, and they were oblivious of what they were carrying. No matter how much I thought about the abnormal death of the second Naomi, the recording that the four of us were about to hear had remained in the back of my mind. Being abandoned inside the building for a month, buying into some trick, falling into disarray along with Shirya, the last thing I wanted was to be a victim of any of that. From that spot, I kept watching. I knew the Sekimeiya would be moved before Shirya and I returned, and the cleaning room provided me with a way to look at Akuro while listening to the event room, and the room I travelled from. If either door was opened, I was fairly certain I'd hear it. In a bit more than 10 minutes, I'd reach my present and meet up with Shirya again. I still had an important chance to understand what was going on. So my thoughts fixated on the culprit, the person responsible for everything. The incident, the 2 murders, and hiding the Sekimeiya. At first, since we hadn't known what the Sekimeiya had been capable of, we'd heavily considered someone else had remained trapped with us, and that they'd been the main culprit. However, that was no longer as concrete. The culprit had used the Sekimeiya and possessed knowledge of it. I'd been pretty sure of that already, but seeing them vanish from the bathroom had been a strong confirmation. They knew what they were doing, and they were consciously escaping from us. While it was possible that a 9th person was present, thanks to the Sekimeiya, it wasn't necessarily the case. Everything that the culprit had done could have been done by one of us as long as they had knowledge of the Sekimeiya's mechanics. Sai had said before that perhaps Kate had been the original discoverer of the Sekimeiya. He could have been the one aware of how it worked. However, he'd continuously told us to keep it in the cabinet while it had been taken out 3 times already. The power outage hiding the Sekimeiya in the storeroom, the 2 killings of Naomi, and whatever might have happened in the attic. I still couldn't explain any of that, but something odd had happened in every one of those instances, meaning that the person responsible must have deliberately used the Sekimeiya to their advantage. So then who were they? What was their purpose? I never stopped asking myself that last question. Why had they needed to kill Naomi? Did their bizarre plan involve trapping us inside the building for the next few weeks? There was no way they could accomplish that. I kept reassuring myself. However, it was undeniable that they must have been recorded on camera, and by somehow keeping the exit shut, they'd prevent the outside from looking at them. That could have had a lot to do with the access denial message that had appeared at the same time the footage had stopped being recognized. Even though it was clear that Kate was the most suspicious person around us, he had kept getting more suspicious by the second. That was what made me hesitant. I continued waiting. At around 11:50 I travelled to the past, and before that the Sekimeiya would be stolen and Akuro would leave. At least I could be calm where I was. I knew Shiro and I hadn't entered the cleaning room. Like before, the minutes kept passing and nothing changed. I couldn't see Akuro inside the bathroom, but I knew he was still there. He had also told us that he spent the entire time inside until he departed to the attic. Even though I knew I'd hear it, I kept glancing at the other side of the hallway every once in a while. If Akuro would be responsible for the Sekimeiya's disappearance though, he'd have to move first. I didn't know what I was about to see, but in the meantime the floor was completely silent. There were no traces of anyone else, and Akuro didn't appear to have been lying for the time being. A few more minutes passed. Our past selves were occupied with listening to the recording. However, down on the crystal floor nothing happened. There wasn't a lot more time left until we'd appear, but I knew for sure that Akuro would first exit the bathroom. Or was that necessarily the case? Hadn't I just experienced someone vanishing from that same bathroom? I started to feel uncertain, but that sensation quickly disappeared. About 8 minutes after the group had disappeared, Akuro did in fact leave the bathroom. He looked tired and still a bit groggy. After breathing deeply, he walked off toward the stairs and disappeared from my field of vision. We told him the elevator wouldn't be functional, so he went up by foot. That meant Shiro and I were about to head down. Similarly, the Sekimeiya was about to be stolen. Keeping an eye on hallway B, I moved toward the bathroom as I still felt something was off with it. I quickly saw the big curtain on the floor that Shiro had brought for Naomi. The culprit had disappeared from the inside, and Akuro might have appeared in the same place. I thought that someone could only travel by making physical contact with the Sekimeiya, so I was interested to see if that could have somehow been possible from the bathroom. There weren't many places to check. I looked in the toilet, in the water tank, and in the garbage can. I couldn't find anything of importance. No Sekimeiya that had travelled from the future, and nothing that indicated how the culprit had disappeared from the inside. Only the Sekimeiya could have made the culprit disappear, and there was no way it had vanished through the toilet. I was checking the bathroom about 20 minutes after the culprit had escaped it, but that shouldn't have mattered. When we'd first discovered Naomi's body, nobody could have removed anything. I was the only person to even set foot inside. Then, once we'd started moving through the floor, Erin and Isla had always kept watch from the stairs, so it also would have been impossible. Once the group had moved to the attic, I'd quickly come back from the second floor and open the door to see if Akro had been present. During that time, there'd been a few seconds where someone could have tampered with the bathroom's interior, but since we'd just searched through the entire floor, they must have traveled from the future, which was very unlikely. I could justify it like that, but there was hardly any chance of it. After that, I checked every room on the floor. Someone could have entered the bathroom at that time, but the door hadn't moved when I'd returned to the cleaning room, and I thought it would have been opened wider if someone had gone through it. So it was very likely the state of the bathroom was identical to how it had been when we'd found Naomi's body, and that there'd been nothing that could have allowed the culprit to escape. If you could travel back in time and bring the Sekimeiya with you, they could have disappeared with it from the bathroom, but nothing indicated that was possible. Could the key to what had happened have been removed by Akro? Whatever it had been, had he left the bathroom with it just then? I'd seen his hands when he'd walked out and they'd been empty. Besides that, he only had a couple of small pockets in his pants. Out of the blue, I heard a sound while I'd still been watching Hallway B. The sound itself didn't surprise me, since I knew someone else must have been around to hide the Sekimeiya. Trying not to announce my presence, I stared at the hallway, knowing that it couldn't yet have been me and Shiraya. Nobody appeared to be there, which was a bit strange. Shortly after, I heard another sound, and that time I discerned that it had come from the opposite hallway. I approached hallway A, a little nervous. As soon as I peeked in, I saw who else was there. It was Sai. He had made the sound and was in front of the event room. However, that shouldn't have been possible. At that moment, he was in the attic. We'd left him in the bedroom after he'd climbed the ladder to look around. While I remained unsure of how to react, he noticed me. As if he'd seen a deadly creature, his shock visibly sent him backward. He had clearly not expected to see me there, and once we made eye contact, he was left petrified, just like I was. I didn't know what his next action would be, so I started to get closer to him. I was half expecting him to run away, but he stood immobile, waiting for me to arrive. Hey Atsuki, how are you doing? I quickly noticed it. He was pretending not to know what he was carrying in his hip pack. All's good, trying to get the most out of my imprisonment. What about you? Coincidentally, me too. Has that led you anywhere? Let's go to the lobby. Huh? Why? I don't know, so we don't freeze the world or something. Shira and I were about to arrive. To avoid anything undesirable, we walked to the lobby even though I didn't elaborate further to Sai. Do you like it better here? Yes, let's not be too loud either. Anyway, where are you gonna bring that? Bring what? What you're hiding there? Sai frowned. He tilted his head down toward his hip pack. Without changing his expression, he unzipped it and the Sekimeiya was uncovered. What the? I bet this will sound funny, but I had no idea this was here. Additionally, the Sekimeiya wasn't white, it was grey, the same shade it had shifted to the last time. It does sound funny. Did you accidentally get it from the cabinet and put it there? Or did it maybe teleport inside? More importantly, how did you get here? You mean that I shouldn't be here, right? I figured. And no, I definitely didn't put it in here. It's not heavy at all, so I didn't notice I had it. He took it out. It didn't make him travel and nothing seemed to have happened. Well, that's hard to believe. Right now the Sekimeiya has disappeared. You must have taken it out when we're about to hide it. The past Chira and I must have already been there. We'd gone to the bathroom first and then to the event room. So if Sai had the Sekimeiya, had I interrupted his actions, thereby changing the past? If that was it, my travel would become impossible. Was something terrible about to happen? None of my other actions had resulted in anything similar. Yeah, I did see the Sekimeiya had disappeared. Was it Akro or was it you? It wasn't either of us. I heard Akro going up the stairs as soon as he left the bathroom, so it wasn't him. I couldn't look at both hallways at the same time, so I can't be sure that you did it, but you just so happened to be holding it. Apparently I am. You traveled from the future, right? Why, because I shouldn't be here? Maybe. I might have traveled, yes. You did too, right? Me? Don't be stupid. I don't know where the Sekimeiya is. I was just searching for it, and it seems I didn't realize I had it. I had no idea how I was supposed to take that. I was about to travel with the Sekimeiya from room B3, so why did Sai have it? Of course, believing that he didn't know it had been in his hip bag was ridiculous. You definitely traveled, right? Did you already have it in your hip pack when you appeared? Is that what you mean? That's an interesting thought, even though I didn't travel. If that had happened, it meant that Sekimeiya had traveled with him too. But what would the reason have been? And then who had hidden the Sekimeiya from the cabinet? It was a fact that we'd seen it empty, but I hadn't seen anyone entering the room where Shiroya had found it. It turned white again. You're right. How bizarre. Sai had put the Sekimeiya back in his pack, and out of nowhere it had changed colors again, recovering its glowing white. So, it went back to normal without the need for the cold temperature. Maybe it works again then. Why don't you try touching it? Because that would be very stupid of me. I'd disappear and leave the Sekimeiya here with you. What if you're the one who keeps hiding it? I don't want to hide it anywhere, and you'd appear in the past. You could make it here the moment you disappear to prevent me from hiding it. That's assuming I appear inside the tower. If I appear outside, you could do anything you wanted with it. He zipped the Sekimeiya inside his pack. I didn't respond, but he wouldn't break the silence before I did. Do you really expect me to believe that you're not going to run off with it? Come on, Sai. I get how you work at this point, more or less. What does that mean exactly? You just like seeing how things play out. You took the Sekimeiya and did something to end up here. I'm not Kate, and you know I'm trustworthy, so why are you trying to lie to me? I'd never lie to you, Atsuki. You know that. We're partners. This brief time we've spent together has awoken my deepest feelings for you, in fact. Can you stop fucking with me just for the sake of it? I want this gem put back in the cabinet, that's all. I'd love to do that. I was just following your orders. You haven't told me to move since you brought me here, so I was just waiting for your next command. Put it back in the cabinet. Did you not hear me? I heard you. Or was that all? What cabinet? There are almost 100 of them. The one in the event room. That one, huh? Sure thing. Give me a second though. This is my self-reflection moment of the day. What the hell was with his face? It appeared completely blank. I stared at the floor for a while, thinking to myself while Sai let me be. He didn't seem to want to move, so I just observed him in silence. It wasn't like I wanted to get into a fight with him, but he clearly had a problem with me. He shifted his weight from one leg to the other in the few minutes we spent in silence, sighing slightly as well. I kept running in circles mentally, not getting anywhere in understanding what the hell was up with him or what had happened with the Sekimeiya. I must have already travelled, assuming things happened as I remember them. This means that Shiroya must be waiting. Follow me, got it? Sure. I gotta say it's not the same without Minty. I walked to the hallway B room where we'd found the Sekimeiya. It was empty. She's not here. Did your girlfriend abandon you? That's tragic. I stepped in farther, but I stopped right as I heard Sai taking off behind me. Hey, stop! I turned around to chase after him. Fortunately, I'd reacted fast enough to grab him as he was opening the door to the event room. What the fuck are you doing? You're fast. I just got really antsy to see if the Sekimeiya was here, that's all. You were totally running from me, and here you can see that it's not. Yeah, it appears I'm holding it. The sudden acceleration had tired me, so I breathed heavily for a few seconds. I had no idea what Sai was doing there, and it seemed Shiroya had gone somewhere as well. Anyway, put it inside. The Sekimeiya? Of course that's what I was gonna do. Let me try not to touch it. He unzipped his pack and hid his hand under his sleeve. Since keeping the Sekimeiya in the pack doesn't make me travel, it could be that it requires physical contact with your skin. I'll try to only touch it with my shirt. He held it in his hand, which was covered by the cloth of his shirt. He didn't disappear, so he might have been right. Then I scrolled open the glass for him, and he placed the Sekimeiya on top of the cushion. Finally, I closed the glass again. I suppose I was correct. Maybe, but touching it has done nothing a few times. It's possible it wouldn't have worked even if you touched it directly. I doubt it, actually. Feel this. He touched my arm with his sleeve. It was hot. It wasn't hot at all when it was grey, but now it was. Even the pack is. I bet something would have happened if I touched it. That's probably why the cold temperature is needed. But that's strange. Earlier we got it out of the cabinet and touched it while it was white, but it was still cold. Maybe something else is needed to activate it? Who knows? Whatever, tell me, what are you doing here? You should still be in the attic. And I am. Consider the me you're talking to right now as a ghost. Are you just fucking with me? You must have traveled to the past just like I did. No way, traveling to the past is impossible. You're getting very irritating. I admit that I traveled to the past, so just do the same. Don't get me wrong, I would if I had. It's just that I haven't. I haven't traveled in time, teleported, or activated the Sekimeiya successfully even once. That's bullshit. How can you be here then? It's not possible. You said I should be in the attic, right? Consider this. What if, in a bit, I'll touch the Sekimeiya to go back to the past and then go to the attic? I don't have to be the version that has already traveled. I can be the original. He has a point. So, at some point the Sai that was around us changed places with you? Of course not. I was only letting you know that it's not impossible. I'm telling you, just treat me as a ghost you hallucinated. I can't be here, you know? I'm in the attic. Why are you being so stubborn? After Shiri and I headed downstairs, you must have done so too. Then you traveled to the past and that's why you're here now. Except that won't happen. You might not believe me, but it's the truth. Then how can you be here? Are you sure I truly am? Am I not a figment of your imagination? You're not. I suddenly thought of something I could corner him with. I grabbed Sai's hand. It was definitely corporeal. He was no ghost. Without explaining, I dragged him to the security room. Immediately, I noticed something odd. Sai, did you enter this room? Didn't we all enter it at some point? Did you enter it during the past 40 minutes? No, I didn't. That's strange, because the door wasn't completely shut. And look, the computer isn't suspended. And so what, I must have entered it? I walked forward to see the time displayed on the computer. It said it was 11:57. I used this computer 47 minutes ago at 11:10. You determined that Kate hadn't been in this room during the attack thanks to the suspension timer, meaning that it must have been higher than 45 minutes. Yes, 50 minutes of inactivity are needed for the computer to power off the screens. So if we wait these remaining 3 minutes, we'll be able to see if I was the last person to use the computer. If by that time the screens are still on, someone else must have used it. Brilliant. But additionally, the last time this door should have been opened was earlier when we searched through the entire floor. We made it a point to close every door when we were done, to make it harder for the culprit to move between rooms and to optimize the search. Yeah, I saw the computer was powered on, which told me that someone had used it in the past hour. The others didn't pay much mind to it, and neither did you. Then we closed the door. So you remember. Good. Despite that, just now it was open a little. Someone must have entered. This isn't the kind of door that will open all by itself. Yes, and do you think it was me? Well, I found you in hallway A, and you said you'd been searching for the Sekimeiya. Did you really not enter this room? I didn't. And even if I had, would you have anything to say? I'm not sure yet. Let me tell you the reason why I brought you here. Show me your wristwatch. My what? It's hidden beneath your sleeve, but I saw you still had it. This is the only room that provides us with the current time, so show me what your own watch displays. Why? Because it might reveal your lie. Let's say you traveled from 12:10. It's possible the time displayed would now be something like 12:20. I see. That would give away that I've come from the future. It's a smart idea. I even said earlier that my time matches the computer's, didn't I? You did. If your time's ahead, you must have travelled. If it's the same, it's possible that the body you appear with is identical to how it was at that point in time. That would back up some things we thought regarding the second Naomi. What if someone edited the computer's time? It would be very easy. Well, if someone did that, it would have been you. The door was open and the screens are still lit. I did check the time 50 minutes ago though, so I guess it couldn't have been modified recently. Although technically you could have changed your wristwatch's time instead. I actually don't even know how to do that. Just as you said that, the computer entered its suspended state. Oh, well, unfortunately there goes your little theory. Then did someone enter this room and not use the computer? There's no way the door just opened. Who knows? Just show me your watch. My what? Your watch. But I'm watching you right now. He clearly had a problem with showing me the time, so I must have been correct. I quickly positioned myself in front of the door so that he couldn't escape again. If you don't want to, you can just admit that you traveled. It's not very hard to figure out. After he spent a few more seconds in silence, I decided to act first. I grabbed his arm and looked at the little screen on his wrist. What? Did you just do this? What's the time? Don't be stupid, it's broken. Excuse me? The screen was blank. Nothing was being displayed on it. It's true. When did it stop working? Are you just fucking with me again? Did you do this right now somehow? I didn't do anything. You were looking at me. I didn't even touch the watch. I couldn't object to that. Even though he'd been buying time, he hadn't touched it at all. You might have anticipated I was going to ask this and disabled it as soon as we entered this room. It's flattering if you think I did that, but honestly I have no idea what happened. I've had it for a long time, so perhaps the battery ran out. I don't even know how to disable it. Let me look at it. I was already grabbing his arm, so I inspected the wristwatch a bit more. 2 buttons were found on its sides, probably to edit the time and other parameters. Can you remove it? Yes, I take it off every night. You've become pretty uncooperative. Just take it off. Are you confiscating it? You're taking a liking to this watch. While he continued speaking in his frivolous tone, he handed it to me. I'd gotten curious about what had happened since Sai had clearly not wanted to show the watch to me. How did you do it? I don't see a power button. I didn't do anything. It just so happened to run out of battery now. That'd be a little too convenient. You can call it fate. Don't worry though, I didn't have anything to hide in the first place. On the back side of the watch there was a slot for the battery. It took some effort, but I opened it to see a single lithium battery. How long have you had it for? A few years. How many approximately? 7 or 8. Perhaps it would have run out now then, but I'm not sure. Lithium batteries, while being more expensive than most, last a very long time. They outlast most devices up to decades. Hey, you're pretty good. In that case, maybe the watch itself broke. It looks perfectly fine to me. Unfortunate then. I'm curious about what happened too, but it might be a bigger mystery than we thought. You're ridiculous. You know exactly what you did to avoid being exposed. I think you're the one being silly here. First, I didn't have anything to hide, and second, I did nothing to this watch. I take good care of it, so I wouldn't break it on a whim. You know, remember upstairs in the attic? I looked through a few drawers and found a bunch of useless junk. I believe I might have seen a compatible battery somewhere. And you were talking about conveniences. You're pretty insistent. I want to know what happened. There's heavy demand for these batteries, and it's common to have a couple lying around. It's also true that I didn't see you mess with the watch, and since it's not damaged, the most likely explanation is a faulty battery, or that it actually was time for it to run out. Let's see if we can power this back on. This is a digital and manual watch. It doesn't receive the time from a satellite. You sounded pretty convincing earlier when you said that you didn't know how to edit the time. Perhaps you just didn't foresee this at all and the battery actually stopped working. If, for example, the battery ran out when the display time was 12:10, as soon as we insert a new one, it could pick up from there. Watches like that exist. Also, this watch was working just earlier when you said it was 11:36. Let's see what happens when we insert a new battery. Are you being serious? We can't go to the attic. I bet I know why. You're up there and we'd see your past self. Additionally, you don't remember anyone going up. Where did you stay? We could be able to avoid being seen. You're getting annoying. I don't know what the people above us are doing. Let's go then. Where did you see the battery? In the living room, under the television. Okay, let's be quick. That works. I made sure to keep holding Sai's sleeve so that he couldn't escape. I hadn't disregarded Shiria, so before moving up I looked through hallway B and still found no trace of her. I started to get a bit worried. She wouldn't have gone anywhere. I'd entered the room soon after we'd left, and she no longer seemed to be on the crystal floor. She couldn't have been attacked, could she? We would have heard a yell, and there hadn't been that much time for it to happen. By going to the attic, I could also check whether she was on the higher floors. For that reason, and because the elevator should have still been disabled, we took the stairs up. We circled through every floor without finding her. The attic was unlocked, so we went up the last narrow staircase and entered the living room. The floor showed we'd surpassed the time we'd gone down. I could see Shiria's and my own footprints heading out. I looked at them for a few seconds, but it was too hard to determine if anyone had left after us. It should be here. I kneeled down and opened a drawer. I had to let go of Sai's hand, but he didn't run away. He seemed to be genuinely confused about what had happened to his wristwatch, so perhaps he'd actually been telling the truth. Yeah, here it is. Alright, let's leave. If he wanted to leave, the most likely reason was that he'd lived through that time already and knew the people who were still in the bedrooms wouldn't notice us. If that was the case, there was no point in defying what he'd experienced. Both of us stepped out of the living room. Before moving down, I looked at the floor one last time, making a mental note of the arrangement of footprints for later. Will it work? Yes, I think so. It should be compatible with your watch. It was still inside its original package, so it hadn't been used at all. It took me a couple of minutes to get it out with no tools, and as soon as I succeeded, it became clear that it would easily fit. It looked the same as the one that had been inside the wristwatch. I uncovered the battery slot again and removed the original battery. I walked to the first partition and left it in a drawer since I didn't have a proper place to dispose of it. Then I put the new one in place. It was small, so it took me a bit, but it fit perfectly. Finished, I put the cover back on and left the packaging in the same drawer. Well, does it work? I turned the watch around and immediately saw that something had changed. It did, but I was wrong. I told you, I wasn't hiding anything. That's not quite what I meant. Look. I showed him what the screen displayed. The 4 digits displaying the time showed that, which most likely indicated that no time had been set. I would have thought that the battery removal had reset the internal system if not for what was above the time. That's strange. It might have been like this when I first got the watch. This should be displaying the current date, right? Yes. It wasn't. The date above the time showed 99991231. I suppose there was no point to my plan then. I don't know if you purposely arranged this, but something definitely happened to this watch. It still works though. It must have actually been the battery. Give it to me. I did so, and he began to fiddle with the buttons. I see. I can easily set the time with these. The time began displaying numbers, and Sai set it to 4. I really don't get what happened, but I'm glad I won't have to get rid of it. I'll make sure to thank Ashia for the new battery too. I wanted to object again, but I couldn't find the words. I didn't know anymore if Sai was aware of what had happened. You traveled to the past, right? Me? Let's say you appeared in hallway A. I'll even believe what you said. You realized the Sekimeiya was gone and failed to notice it was in your hip bag. You have a watch, so you would have looked at it to find out how far back you'd gone. Did you do that? I didn't. However, I didn't travel to the past either, so your question is pretty pointless. The date was the odd point. Swapping the battery shouldn't have changed it to 99991231, and it was unlikely Sai had edited it. Needless to say, it was the highest date the format of the watch would allow. Anyway, let's go back down. To the crystal floor? Yes, I have something to do. Alright. We started moving down. I didn't know what Sai planned to do, but I still had to find Shiria, who most likely was somewhere below us. Shiria's not currently in the attic, right? Who's that? I let it go before he got on my nerves. We silently walked all the way down. At first glance, the floor still appeared empty. What did you want to do? Oh, let's go to the security room. Through hallway A, we began walking toward it. His pace was slow and I'd been in front of him the whole time. Once I was about to reach the doorknob, I heard a sound behind me. I saw an empty hallway as I heard the event room closing.